Welcome to tonight's Town Hall with Oregon State University's President F. King Alexander. My name is Mads Gwynn, the 2020-2021 Director of Legislative Affairs with the Associated Students of Cascades campus. I'm a second-year student at OSU Cascades, majoring in American Studies with a minor in Tourism, Recreation, and Adventure Leadership. Tonight we are joined by OSU's 15th President, F. King Alexander, to talk about legislative advocacy and ways OSU engages with our representatives in Salem. We have collected a few questions from our audience in advance, and we'll be collecting more questions from you during the session. If you have a question for President Alexander, please leave them in the chat. If we are unable to answer your question in today's session, please sign up for the Beaver Caucus. We'll be posting answers to additional questions on beavercaucus.com. Before we start, here's a brief video to kick us off.
Hello, I'm F. King Alexander, and I'm thrilled to serve as your 15th president of Oregon State University. We all know the challenging times that we face here at Oregon State University, throughout Oregon and the nation and the world. These unprecedented times require us to build a more compassionate and caring university and society. Together, we will address the uncertainty of COVID-19, the pandemic that is threatening the world as we know it. Together, we will advance Oregon State University's work in social justice and inclusivity. Together, we will act to assure that Black lives matter and the lives of Indigenous people matter and people of color. Yes, we have much to do in building upon the momentum of care, compassion, and changing society for the better for all. Know that I'm listening. I'm here to learn from you, to hear and work alongside of you as we go forward, to advance a welcoming, just, civil society of inclusivity, to provide for success of all undergraduate students and all graduate students, and to advance Oregon State University's long tradition of service to its community and to the world around us. That's for all Oregonians and people throughout the world. Let's do this collaboratively and let's do this together.
Hi, I'm Quincy Johnson, a senior in history and education at OSU main campus in Corvallis. I've been involved with advocacy at OSU through working in the Government Relations Office and participating in the Presidential Student Legislative Advocates Program, also known as the PSLA. Today's event is being organized by the Beaver Caucus, a group of alumni and friends dedicated to making OSU a priority for Oregon's elected leaders. We'll be sharing more information about the caucus and how you can be involved later in this hour. Now, on to our main event. Allow me to introduce you to OSU's 15th president, F. King Alexander. President Alexander is a prominent national advocate for advancing equal opportunity for all people through higher education. He is passionate to provide access and affordable education to all learners and has provided congressional testimony on barriers to equal opportunity for college students and college affordability. President Alexander has a lot of experience working with state and federal legislators. We're excited to work with him on behalf of OSU. President Alexander, thank you for taking your time to talk with us tonight. I think that you're muted right now, President.
Oh, here we go. Thank you, Quincy, and I'm pleased to join all of you today. I greatly appreciate the Beaver Caucus and its collaboration in support of Oregon State University's efforts with the state legislature. I've worked with many other caucuses in other states and know how important your voice can be when we collaborate together and address the most important challenges that we face, particularly in our state governments. Thank you for taking this personal time and the energy that you contribute for Oregon State University. We have Oregon State students with us today, and I thank them, Madeline and Quincy. Thank you for your advocacy and the work that you do each and every day. And I thank all of our other student advocates as well. These are indeed unprecedented times, and the importance of higher education has never been more significant for our students, our Oregon communities, for the economy, for underrepresented faculty and staff, and students and our entire state. With a global pandemic, an economic recession, wildfires that have burned communities and forests, and calls for racial equity and ending racism throughout our country, Oregon State University's role as Oregon's statewide university is more important than ever today. The economic and societal challenges of our state, the nation, and the world are the Oregon State University's challenges and indeed our responsibilities. If we are not addressing these issues, then we are not the land-grant university that the state needs us to be and indeed expects us to be. You take a look at our research capacity as a university. Last year, Oregon State University generated $450 million in external research funding. It's a new university record, but more importantly, that's $450 million that's coming to the state of Oregon. And it's not going to Ohio State University, who we compete against, UCLA, or many of the other big universities that are land-grant universities as well. This research helps drive the state's economy and our development. It's more important than ever that we work together to advance support within our legislature for university research, OSU's extension and community programming statewide in every county. And as we head towards the 2021 session, which will indeed be a difficult session, we must work together on these three priorities. We anticipated state revenue declines continuing in the years of 2021 through 2023. It could actually happen even beyond that. We must take the case to prioritize higher education to our legislators and to the people of this state. The legislature prioritized higher education this past August, and we thank them and the governor for not cutting us as we went forward this past August and maintaining the support of the current budget. It will not be that easy in 2021. And with the legislative session looming, it worries me a little bit that it reminds me of what happened in 2011 and 2012, when higher education became the big target in virtually every state in the country. As well, strong coalitions will need to preserve the funding of our university statewide public service programs, like Oregon State University's extension, our agricultural experimental stations with our 4-H programs, and the Forest Research Laboratory. Historically, these programs have been discussed during bad economic times. Lastly, we will advocate for state bonding support to create and enhance 21st century learning environments by investing in OSU Cascades Student Success Center and the continued renovations of our Science Hall, Quarterly Hall on our Corvallis campus. I know that you are engaged and you care about Oregon State. You wouldn't be here today. I know that you understand the value of a college degree and have personally benefited from the power of an Oregon State University degree. Thank you, Beaver Caucus and the Beaver Caucus members, for all your support, your commitment. And as we go forward, I look forward to working with you to protect what is great about our university and what's going to be great about what we do in the future for our citizens of Oregon and the nation. Thank you. I think Quincy will begin the questions.
Thank you so much, President Alexander. Before we start asking you questions, actually, do you have any questions for Quincy or me?
Certainly, I'd just like to know how you guys got into the advocacy work and why are you so passionate and doing what you're doing with so many student leaders?
So for me, advocacy actually started when I was in high school. I worked with my school newspaper and I worked with a youth version of a We the People team, which taught students, particularly middle schoolers, about the Constitution and how that's applicable to their life. And then coming into college, I joined the ASCC midway through last year and became really involved with the previous legislative director and was very interested in that. And this year I actually ran for the director of legislative affairs and won. And I was really excited about that and how that can later contribute to a career for me in civil rights law. And that's kind of how my advocacy journey has looked. What about you, Quincy?
Well, I didn't start in high school like you, but I waited until college. I actually wasn't interested in doing politics at all up until I was invited to join the Presidential Student Legislative Advocates Program, the PSLA. Once I got into that program and was able to go up to the state capitol and advocate, as a student and, talk to those legislators in person and give them what students need to be able to do and give our voice. It was a very monumental experience, and it was very powerful, and I was wanting to do that more and more. And so I've been more, interested in being an advocate and being part of Beaver Caucus and things like that. So it's been very cool to have these experiences and do that.
Thank you both. That sounds great. You're involved. You've been involved for a while too. You want to start off with the questions, I guess?
Yeah, thank you so much. So our guests are really eager to hear your opinions on, so it's like the state of higher education, social justice, affordability of college. And so we're going to start with our advocacy priorities. Our first question is from Laura Pizzo. What are the top 3 most important initiatives for legislative advocacy on behalf of OSU in the next year? And how can alumni help?
It's a great question. I would say the overwhelming question that sticks in my mind is I'm worried about what happened to us in 2011 and 12 when the stimulus dollars went away and we had a statewide budget deficit. It wasn't just in Oregon, it was in California, it was in Louisiana, it was in Texas. And now we're staring at the same type scenario going into this legislative session. We've allowed our state legislatures throughout the country to get out of the affordability business in terms of we've been cut more often than we have received any resources to remain affordable. And I think just by the nature of the higher education that's out there today, student indebtedness, free college, all of these are presidential level issues that we're hearing about the highest offices in the land now. I think we need to ensure that our state legislature understands that these are investments in the next generation of students. And that next generation of graduates will be the generation that drives our new economy. And disinvesting more in our students today means costs will go up and student indebtedness will only grow and expand. So first and foremost, I think you asked for 3 important considerations. That's certainly the highest one, and the one I've been fighting for to maintain support for nearly 2 decades as a president. Our research funding. People in our state need to fully understand that we are the research university of Oregon. In fact, our research funding, we generate more research funding for projects in the forest, climate change, the oceans. We generate more research dollars than every other university in Oregon combined. So this is a very important priority and third, we have to protect our extension operations that are in every county. Our extension operations are working on rebuilding many of the communities that have been devastated by the wildfires, but also our ag extension centers that work on 220 different commodities for the state of Oregon. These are all 3 and really important priorities for Oregon State University, but also for the people of Oregon, that we are able to move forward by utilizing those 3 issues and supporting those 3 big issues.
Thank you, Mr. President, for answering that question. We really appreciate how long you've been advocating for higher education. That's really awesome to have you in this position right now. What is the future for legislative support for Cascades expansion?
So I was on our campus. The provost and I traveled and spent the day last Thursday at our Cascades campus, and the potential, I'm just stunned by the potential of what we have there. And Bend is growing faster than probably any community in Oregon. And our university is growing. Actually, our Cascades campus grew by 28% this past year at a time when virtually no other university in the state had an increase in student population. So the demand is there, the need is there. I have great hope for what we can do at OSU Cascades. And I'd love to see OSU Cascades get to 5,000 students as quickly as we can get the buildings in place to move them forward. It has enormous potential. And that's what I saw moving around all day Thursday with the new land, 140 new acres that'll be part of the campus, but also just the growth of Bend in that whole area is a hotbed of activity. And we have big plans for OSU Cascades.
I really appreciate the kind words about my campus. It's really important. I always get really excited to hear positive things about Cascades. So our next question is from Joanna DeMeyer, and she wants to know, with the current pandemic, what plans are being considered to ensure participation in advocacy?
Well, I think that we're learning about every week whether we're getting better or we're moving backwards with regard to the pandemic. And we meet on this issue every single day to see what we're doing right, to see what else we can do to make sure that our students, faculty, and staff are safe. I think it looks as though we may begin the legislative session with a lot of Zoom testimonies. I do believe that we're going to be in this circumstance. We just announced this morning that we will be remotely learning throughout the winter term for the Corvallis campus. And that's about where we are right now. Until we can see a break in this, until we can get to a point where we have much more confidence, where we can meet in the Capitol or push hard as a group in the Capitol, we're just going to have to do it remotely and be as aggressively and go about it as aggressively as possible from the remote side of things. Many of us know how to do this now. You did it for us last year, and you did it last spring and throughout the summer. And we deeply appreciate all the advocacy that you have done up until now. But it does look like we may be at least half in Zoom when the session begins. The whole session could actually be in Zoom. We'll just need to figure a way to do it in a manner that benefits both campuses and Hatfield, and benefits our Hatfield campus as well as our satellite campus that's in.
Thank you for answering that question as well. I did not know I would know so much about Zoom before 2020, but I guess we'll be using Zoom and other things besides school. This is from Nancy Lee and Lorenzo Curtis on some tuition state support issues. What are some plans or initiatives to adjust tuition to make it more affordable for students, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds? In your view, is this a priority for legislators?
That's a very good question. I can't speak for the legislators themselves. It is a top priority for me. We are one of the best enterprises this country has in improving and advancing social mobility. And we've got a challenge that we're facing at our state legislators in many corners of our capitals. They only see higher education as an individual benefit. They've forgotten that it's a societal benefit. And by that, they get about a 12 or 13% return on every dollar they invest in our students. That has been constant since about 1961 when we started first measuring the social rate of return. To say it's an individual benefit is also a tricky way of saying that the student therefore should pick up the entire cost. That means that the baby boomers need to realize that investing in the next generation of students could be the wisest investment that they make. And we have to constantly make this case with our state legislators because it's easy. It's easy to cut public higher education and public colleges and universities. They've clearly demonstrated this since 1981, where we're down to 58% from what we spent in 1981 in tax effort in spending for public higher education. And the consequence of that has been constantly increasing tuition and fees that the students have had to find the resources to use. And the consequence of that has been massive student indebtedness that we see as a national issue now. The last thing we need to do, particularly for our underrepresented, low-income, first-generation Pell recipient students, is saddle them with any debt whatsoever. And that's what we have to convey to the legislature. It's what we have to convey to each and every individual legislator, because they say they support our students. They'll tell you that. I urge each and every one of this to just watch how they vote, because that's when you determine whether they're really supportive or not, is how they're voting. And that's what our advocates, certainly hope our Beaver Caucus advocates can convey that issue, that it's how people vote, not necessarily what they say. And that's from 20 years of experience in 6 different states.
Thank you so much. So there's been a lot of volatility around Oregon's budget forecast. Even though last week with the revenue forecast, we got some kind of good news that the shortfall won't be quite as dire as originally thought. But what do you feel are some opportunities or challenges for state investment in higher education for the 2021 legislative session?
Well, the last revenue estimating committee came forward and we basically cut the deficit in half. It was looking at about $4 billion. Now it's about $2 billion. I'd like to see that if we have to go through the session and we do have to manage some degree of cuts to our budget, I'd like to make sure there's federal leverage in some of these stimulus packages that come out. And federal leverage says you can only take federal dollars if and only if you reinvest back into higher education in 1 or 2 years from now, so that we don't go down and get hammered like we did in 2012. And it took us till last year to get back to where we were in funding in 2008. So we're in danger of watching our budget go down significantly and then clawing our way back for the next 8 years just to get back to where we are this year or last year. And I'd like to see federal leverage, at least some incentivizing put on our state legislature to actually put more money and to reinvest when years start getting better, and to reinvest, because even though we got back to our 2008 funding level, we still haven't gotten back to our 2002 funding level. So we've got a long way to go. And I would like them to understand that that's not a good place to be, is to constantly, within the last 10 years, in 2 economic recessions, hammering your public higher education institutions.
Thank you, President Alexander. We're going to transition into some on-campus life questions. This is from Teresa May. She said, social justice issues are at the front of everyone's minds right now and are the focus of a lot of grassroots advocacy, especially among our fellow students. What are OSU's goals for making our campuses welcoming and safe environments for students of all backgrounds?
So that's a great question, and we have just committed to 37 different initiatives that we can use on campus for our faculty, staff, and students of color, which also includes actually getting out there and recruiting more students of color, so the university looks more like the globe or the country that we live in. And so diversifying our university is going to be an ongoing priority of our university. It has been. But we've got to go into the communities and this is the problem with the pandemic. We can't exactly get into the heart and soul of our communities, our underrepresented communities, for recruitment purposes, for alliance building, to help in the advocacy area. These 37 initiatives, many of them have already been going on, which is about the recruitment and retention of students and faculty and staff of color. But many of them are new as well. And we appreciate the students that brought many of these concerns and action possibilities to us. And I can assure you that our university and my administration and the entire campus is going to be measured by how effective we are in these 37 different initiatives as we go forward. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon issue, and it will continue to be an important challenge for our university. But we accept that challenge, and moving forward, we want to do it together with everybody.
I really appreciate how passionate you are about that. That means a lot to hear from a president. Real quick before I ask the next question, I just want to remind the audience they can actually submit questions for you to answer in the Q&A feature. So make sure you're asking questions if you're in the audience, if there's anything you want to know from President Alexander. But back to President Alexander. So a lot of OSU students are relying on campus resources for medical services, including mental health services. With the COVID-19 pandemic, more mental health services are required from students struggling with an unpredictable environment. What resources are being offered to our students to address their mental health needs? And do you think the state legislature is aware of the breadth of support services OSU provides beyond the classroom?
I'll tackle the last part of that question first. Probably not. They're probably not familiar with the whole array and range of support services that we have. And that's our problem that we need to bring to their attention. Our mental health services, we've actually increased the number of counselors. We've learned in the spring and over the summer to be more effective as we go forward in doing it remotely with many of our students. We have about half of our students back in Corvallis, and another half decided to stay home and just utilize Zoom and the remote teaching that we're doing. We gave them a choice. I'm pleased to see that nearly half of our students came back because they want to have this emotional tie. And I think this was a very unpredicted part. Many people, I remember Peter Drucker said in 2020, universities won't need bricks and mortar because they'll figure out another way to do it. I disagree with that because we offered every one of our students the opportunity to stay at home and learn remotely, or come to campus if you can learn better here together with the services that we provide, including mental health services. And half the students came back. Half the students are thrilled to be back, to be around each other. And that's an important part of mental health as well. People are tired of being locked up in their homes. They're tired of doing nothing but remote activities. And there's a need of calling for our students to be around their friends, to be around other young people that are going through the same thing that we all are going through in this pandemic crisis. So we're putting more resources into mental health services and counseling, and we will continue to do so. And as the needs grow, we will continue to address those needs as effectively as we can, both remotely, but also in person if needed.
Thank you, President Alexander. Being on campus is definitely a very nice experience. And so a lot of students coming back isn't much of a surprise for all of us. But we are in the middle of a recession. What is your message for state leaders about the role OSU plays in driving Oregon's economy, both as an educational institution and as our state's land-grant university?
Well, I would say as an educational institution, there are only 2 universities in the country that are land grant, sea grant, space grant, and sun grant universities, which means that on the tail end of that, we've got a commitment to sustainability and helping Oregon become much more sustainable and livable place as we go forward. I think the wildfires have clearly shown that we're going to be addressing many climate issues in the future, and this was just one of them, the tragedy that hit many of our communities. As an educational institution, we're in every county. We have 90,000 what I would consider pre-Oregon State University students, 90,000 4-Hers who are out there in 4-H programs and 4-H service programs in every county in the state. Nobody else can claim that. We are the largest institution in the state, which means that our graduating classes can help mold and shape new economies. And that's very important. We're a STEM institution and an engineering institution that also takes pride in our liberal arts. But just as importantly, we are an affordable campus and we want to keep it that way. Our graduates start out with great starting salaries and with substantially less debt than many of their peers around the country. And in fact, only 48% of our undergraduates graduate with any debt. The national average is about 78%. And the starting salaries of a graduate from Oregon State University with a degree that walks out the door, the starting salaries are better than UNC Chapel Hill's starting salaries, better than Iowa State, Iowa, Indiana, Minnesota, TCU, Florida, Auburn. The list goes on and on. So our students are getting off to a great start and they're not saddled with debt. We just have to work with our state legislature and work with our industrial partners and companies to make sure that these bright young people stay in Oregon and build this state's economy. And we look forward to working with our advocates to create that type of environment where Oregon State University graduates are building the new economy of the future, but they're doing it here in Oregon.
You just threw a lot of information at me about OSU that I wasn't sure I knew. That was really cool to listen to. So you've been talking about a lot of support for OSU at the state level, but can you tell us a little bit more about the support from the federal government and what impact that has on the state as a whole?
So as I mentioned, particularly in the research area, from National Science Foundation, NIH, National Institute of Health, Department of Energy, our NOAA over here at Hatfield, our support on our oceanography. The federal government plays a very important role in supporting our research that is designed to solve these problems that I mentioned earlier, these big problems: racial injustice, economic inequities, healthcare related inequities that have come out during this pandemic. We've seen just how dramatic the healthcare disparities really are. Climate change, all of these issues these are the things that our faculty utilize research, utilize our laboratories, and the federal government plays a significant role. Keeping Oregon State University as a competitive force for these revenues and resources is vital for this state. And as I mentioned, we really don't compete with anybody else in the state when we're battling for these resources out of NSF and NIH. We're up against Wisconsin. We're up against Penn State. We're up against Michigan and UCLA. They're competing for these very dollars. So when we're able to bring nearly $500 million to this state because we won those competitions, we won the right to pursue these objectives and these challenges through our research, then we're bringing a big win to the state of Oregon, to the people of Oregon. And we just have to make sure that you're keeping Oregon State University competitive. This is where we need the caucus folks and the advocates even more. What I've found in most states is that state legislators themselves really do not understand the value of the research that we conduct and provide for the state. They really do not understand what those resources, what it means for us to outbid, outcompete, and win these big battles in Washington, D.C. to bring the type of funding that we're bringing to Oregon. We need our caucus members to remind our state legislators that the main research university in this state is Oregon State University, and you must support them. And here's just a small example. The wine board came to us 3 weeks ago because they didn't have any way to test their harvest grapes because of the smoke damage that had been done. We set up a laboratory and an institute on our own campus, and within 3 days, they were bringing their grapes for us to test to determine when they should harvest these grapes, or should they throw them away because they're particularly damaged because of the smoke. That's just one small example of the type of research work that we're doing to preserve the wine industry in this state, for example.
Thank you, President Alexander. And absolutely, a lot of legislators, them not understanding a lot of Oregon State, we have to have advocacy to help with that. And so my question is, this is actually come from one of the Q&A questions. Who do you think are the best messengers to illustrate OSU's statewide economic impact to legislators?
I always like to get students in front of them. I think students have a better way of asking our state legislators point blank. You say you support higher education. You say you support students. We need you to prove it when you vote. And our students are always great ambassadors and great advocates. I would also say that many of these legislators are very good friends with very influential people in their communities. And many of the, I guess we have 97 on today, many of our 97 participants know something about these legislators, may have helped them get into office. And particularly those that have even given resources, that have given lots of resources to their campaigns. So I would say students first, and I would say advocates that are well connected with these candidates, with these sitting legislators, they're the second best. And third, I would say as part of that group, that can also include industry and business. Industry and business in our Chamber of Commerce's, our Rotary clubs, are very important in getting many of our elected officials' attention and pushing an agenda that supports the next generation of graduates and next generation of students.
I might be a bit biased, but I would tend to agree with the student advocacy portion of that one. That's my entire job, is let's get together people and go lobby. So I would tend to agree with that. But all of that I agree with strongly. I think that it's really important that we have multiple faceted.
Mads, I'll tell you, we had because it was the students, I have to say this happened 2 years ago in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The students were upset by the proposed budget reductions, so they all got t-shirts from out-of-state universities and put them on. And they paraded around the Capitol with all kinds of state university shirts from every other state except Louisiana. It was very impactful. The news picked it up. It sent the right message. That was very important.
Student voices really are important. I think we have one more question. Time for one more question. So how can OSU support students who will be graduating in the midst of a recession?
You know, a number of ways. Most times in economic recessions, we've seen, as we have seen here in Corvallis, our graduate schools have gone up about 10% in students. It's a good time to go to graduate school because the job opportunities may not be as robust as they will in a couple of years. B, our Career Placement and Planning Center is there to help. And many of our Beaver Caucus individuals who are running businesses, whether they're agricultural businesses, the wine industry, the technology, engineering, we want to connect and use our alumni association to connect our graduates with our former graduates and work the network of Beavers who are out there and work with them to give our students a running start in an environment that has been very unfair to our students of today. But I commend our students. We graduated 7,100. It was the second largest graduating class last year. And our students are still plowing ahead in this difficult environment. And I would say that the resilience of the students that are graduating, I would hope the industry leaders, and I would hope government officials and others understand this is a special group of students who have gone through this, and this uninvited pandemic wasn't their fault, but they have figured out a way to finish what they started and have progressed forward. And I say it's a special group of graduates that are coming out. And we'll work with them wherever they want to pursue a career, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you, President Alexander. As a senior, and I like being told that I'm special. But seriously, thank you so much for your time. It's always great to hear from the leader of this awesome university. And as a student, I just want to thank you for taking the time to answer these questions and to be there for the whole university, students, faculty, everyone. And yeah, really appreciate it.
Quincy, you are special. So Quincy Jones is a senior studying history and education in Corvallis. And Mads Gwynn is a sophomore majoring in American Studies and Tourism, Recreation, and Venture Leadership at OSU Cascades. Looking ahead, I ask all of you if you just continue the important work of advocating and being a part of our Beaver Caucus. Engaging with your state legislative leaders is very important, and other senators and representatives. And we are certainly going to need you in the springtime. We invite other OSU alums and friends to join this great caucus and become advocates for Oregon State University. And regardless of your politics or party of choice, make sure you register to vote and make your vote known this November. Thank you all each and every day for doing what you're doing and being a part of this Beaver Caucus. And when the bell rings and we need your advocacy, we certainly could use it. But more importantly, the students that you're listening to today, the students of today need your advocacy more than ever. So thank you for being great graduates of our institution. And I look forward to working with you to support the student population and this great mission that only Oregon State University has in this great state. Thank you all very much for joining us today.